An old tungsten bulb hung from the center of the room by a black crooked patterns, ticking away the seconds. 10 people in very, somewhat tattered clothes were seated around the table, their faces smudged with dirt. Some were slumped over the table, others leaned back in their chairs, all of them fast asleep. Standing silently beside these 10 people was a man in a black suit wearing a goat minus head mask. His gaze pierced through the dilapidated mask, studying the 10 individuals with great interest. The clock on the table chimed its minute and our hands both pointing to the 12. From somewhere far beyond the room, the deep toll of a bell echoed. At that same moment, the men and women sitting around the round table slowly began to stir. As they gradually regained consciousness, they first looked around in a daze, then at each other in confusion. It seemed that none of them could remember why they were here. "Good morning, Unine," the goat minus headed man spoke first. "A pleasure to meet you all here. You've been sleeping before me for 12 hours now." The man's get-up was so bizarre it startled everyone under the dim light. His mask looked as if it were made from a real goat's head, with much of the fur yellowed and blackened, matted together in clumps. 2 holes were carved out for the eyes, revealing his own cunning gaze from within. With every gesture, he exuded not only the unique game-wise smell of a goat, but also a faint whiff of decay. A man with a floral minus arm tattoo stared for a few seconds before the absurdity of the situation finally hit him. He asked the goat minus headed man hesitantly, "Who are you?" "I believe you all have that question, so allow me to introduce myself to the 9 of you," the goat minus headed man said, waving his hands cheerfully. It seemed he had long prepared his answer. A young man named Caleb sat furthest from the goat minus headed man. He quickly surveyed the room, and after a moment, his expression turned grim. Strange, he thought. This room is just too strange. There are no doors, just for walls. In other words, the room, its walls, ceiling, and floor was completely sealed, yet there was a table placed right in the middle. If that was the case, how did they get here? Were they brought in first and then the walls were built around them? Caleb looked around again. The floor, walls, and ceiling were all covered with intersecting horizontal and vertical lines, dividing the surfaces into large squares. Another thing that bothered Caleb was what the goat minus headed man had said, "9." No matter how he counted, there were N people sitting around the table. Including the goat minus headed man himself, there were 11 people in the room. What did 9 mean? He reached into his pocket just as he expected. His phone was gone. "You don't need to introduce yourself to us," a woman with a cool voice said to the goat minus headed man. "I suggest you stop what you're doing immediately. I suspect you've detained us for more than 20 minus 4 hours, which constitutes unlawful detention."